2 days of rain and cold gave my husband and I permission to relax this Father's Day weekend. But the rains have finally died down, and this morning we are both ready and eager to get to work. There is so much to do and so much we want to do this summer. So today we will be starting a new no-dig garden in the lowland area of our property. So this is where we hope to, over time, transform the shallow soils into deeper, richer, more productive land. So we've been collecting cardboard from work and storing it under the platform in our living room, and now we are ready to use it as a weed barrier to start off a new growing area that we hope to use next spring. Right now I am removing the stickers and plastic tape from the cardboard, as well as any staples or other pieces of metal that may have been used in the packaging. We are not using any of the glossy cardboard or any cardboard that is heavily dyed, as we want to use as much organic material as possible in our new beds. So our shared homesteading journey began 2 years ago when the pandemic sent my husband and I home for about a month in early spring. At the time, we were engaged and had planned a trip to Florida for a springtime wedding that was ultimately canceled. No worries though, we did eventually find time to get married a year later. But at the time, we were both stuck at home with a bunch of money saved up, wondering what we could do with it that would make good use of it when the future felt so unpredictable. So eventually we agreed that for our health and happiness, we would build an outdoor living space with that money, complete with a small raised bed where I grew sage, thyme, and rosemary for the very first time. From there, I fell in love with the idea of growing my own food, and each year we have built more raised beds and are planning to grow more and more of our own organic food.
So all the stuff for making another bed.
Yeah, I'm gonna lay it out if you want to help me decide where. So the method we are using to start this raised bed is often called lasagna gardening, which, starting with cardboard, involves different layers of organic matter and dirt to begin a new growing area for your plants. So I've had these compost piles going for about 2 years, and as we've kind of focused the area that we're working in, I've decided to move the compost piles a bit closer to the house. So you can probably see here. So here's one of my old compost piles, and this is the other one right behind me here. And you can see behind me, so it's a pretty long ways to go from the actual garden. For our organic matter, we will be using a partially broken down compost pile that is admittedly a little far from where our garden is. We've since started a compost pile much closer to the house and plan to use what is left of this one to start a new no-dig garden. As you can see, there is some dark organic matter, but plenty of intact straw and leaves that have yet to break down. We will cover this organic matter with a mulch and probably let it sit for a season while worms, slugs, and other microorganisms break it down into something that our plants can root in next spring. As I said earlier, we have been growing our garden for the last 2 years. Let me share with you all that we've done in those 2 seasons. In our backyard at the top of the hill, we have a raised bed that is made of rocks dug up from our property, as well as some bought cut stone. Here I am growing leeks, chives, kale, Swiss chard, and a volunteer potato plant. It's a windy spot to be sure, but the plants seem to be holding up well this year. On our porch, we've started a few pepper plants and whiskey barrels. Going down the hillside, we have terraced an area for blueberry plants of varying ages. This 2-year-old blueberry bush is the first ever to fruit on the property, and I cannot even begin to tell you how excited I am to finally take my first bite. We've also terraced an area for medicinal herbs such as calendula and chamomile. These beds were built by me using stones collected from the property. It isn't a fancy terrace by any means, and we do have plans to redo it properly in the future. So down the hillside are our other raised beds that we just started this year, and these are built on shallow soil with slate bedrock. And as you can see, we have a row of 5 potted tomato plants that are opposite of all of our raised beds. These raised beds here, you can see that we are growing some garlic, elephant garlic to be specific, and some red potatoes and Yukon gold potatoes. In another raised bed, we are growing broccoli, which is coming along quite well this year. This year I am experimenting with intercropped onions and carrots. We also have a row of black beans that I staggered the planting so that we could harvest throughout the summer. And finally, beside our raised beds is the no-dig in-ground garden area that we started this year. So the right half of this area was actually ready to plant this year, so we added some corn and beans and plan to add squash later during the year. And last, on the northern side of our property, we have the medicinal herb garden that is still in the works. So this herb garden is built out of a lot of materials that we had on hand around the property, so rocks, sawdust, as well as a few things that we bought, such as the fire rings. This garden is still in development, so I will probably talk about this more at length in another video, but just wanted to share a few snippets of what we are working on in this area. So I grew up in rural coastal Maine while my husband came from a suburbia in Kansas. When his family moved to Maine, they homesteaded for a few years, so he had some experience in farming from his childhood. Neither my parents nor grandparents were farmers, so a lot of this is brand new to me. What I did know is that I love the woods, I love nature, and I followed that passion into college, getting a degree in forestry and learning all I could about plant ID and the interconnectedness of forest ecosystems. I learned about the importance of soil health, the importance of sustainable, low-impact methods of harvesting and utilizing our state's natural resources. And while I primarily focused on forest ecosystems in my degree, these ideas and practices can easily be applied to agriculture as well. Like many places around the country, our state is dealing with the consequences of man-made chemicals in our waters, our soils, and the challenge of an unpredictable and changing climate, as well as more recent challenges. So major interruptions in the supply chain, the rising cost of fuel and food, all of this has put an important question on my mind and heart. And so I have to ask myself, what would we do if we had to provide for ourselves right where our feet are planted? And how could we do it in a way that leaves a healthier environment and a more resilient community for future generations? So I know that I can contribute my knowledge and passions and skills to growing food for my family and perhaps one day my community as well. But my way is not the only way. I do believe that we all have something that is needed that we can offer to others. I think for a long time our society has become a little bit divorced from nature and from community and just the things that make us human. But I do believe that is changing. I do believe that our society is waking up and going through a transformation, and I'm just so excited to be a part of that. As we are forced to reassess our needs and our lifestyles, there's going to be some growing pains with it. So I hope if you are ever feeling overwhelmed, just know that I am right there with you and we can do this together just one day at a time. So I've laid down my first layer of compost, and what I am doing now is using the grass clippings from my husband's mowing to cover the compost. And the reason I'm doing this is you don't want the compost to dry out in the sun. You want the worms to be able to get in there and help break that stuff down over the summer. So we'll be adding grass to the top of this throughout the summer to shield the soil and keep it moist and get it ready to be used next year. So in a few days the grass will dry out and look much like the other beds we've created. And if you look at one of those beds, you can see underneath the grass there is some nice dark soil that is forming.